everyone. It's great to have you joining us today. Today, we are talking about how customers can use Flowgear to level up their integration strategy, and particularly how you, as a Sage business partner, can benefit from this opportunity. So to begin with, I want to position what typically happens in an organization. If you think back 10, 15 years, a lot of apps that organizations were using were on-premise. They all lived often on the same server in a smaller business. And so it was quite practical to cobble together scripts and move data across them. What also would have happened is there tended to be a lot fewer apps, and so the need for integration was less pronounced. And now with the proliferation of cloud, and not just that, but the degree of specialization of the apps that are available means that there are more integration touch points than ever before. And cloud makes it harder to integrate because whereas before you could have gone straight to the database, you now need to use the API and you need to understand how to authenticate into that API and so on. And so modern orgs are using a greater number of apps than ever before, but at the same time, they need to be much more structured around how they choose to integrate between them to avoid creating chaos. And there's typically several stages that a business will go through as it grows in trying to get a handle on that and achieve some level of integration. The first is basically no integration at all. So if you're in an e-commerce shop, you put up a store, customers place orders, and you have some swivel chair integration where someone's job is to manually recapture those orders, say into your Sage ERP or Sage Intacct. That pretty soon stops scaling. Obviously, a huge delay and latency and like margin of error associated with that. So the kind of next default step up is in a business that is not a tech business, there's probably like the lone IT guy, and his job is to figure out how to get something up and running. So some scripts are cobbled together, maybe there are some database calls, some kind of batch automations. And while these might suit the purpose in the short term, they are normally fairly inefficient. There's typically no logging. They're scattered about the infrastructure, so they're hard to keep control of. And you're typically dependent on few, if not just one person in the organization. So very difficult to have kind of business grade continuity in that regard. The next level up from that would be tools like a Zapier or an IFT, where a citizen integrator can easily connect two different apps together and create a sync for a specific type of object. And these tools are very quick to get up and running. They certainly do a fantastic job of simplifying and kind of abstracting the complexity of the underlying APIs. But the trade-off from that is the degree to which they abstract restricts the level of sophistication of what can be built. And so while they might be good for some of the kind of most boilerplate integrations and kind of give you a quick leg up, most businesses tend to cap out quite quickly on those tool sets. And so the final scenario would be a platform designed specifically for this purpose. And of course, that's what we're talking about today. And as we start to look at Flowgear, where it fits and how it can help businesses, I want to begin by positioning it on this continuum. So if you think of kind of a straight line of all of the tools that are out there, and you're going to pick an X point on that line as to where you're going to position them, one way to reason about that is to look at things like the citizen integrator tools, which obviously have a very high ease of use. And then all the way on the other extreme, you've got enterprise-facing tools like ESB or Enterprise Service Bus, which have a much lower ease of use, but allow you to build things that are much more complex. And that trade-off is effectively inevitable. You can't do both really well. You can't do both perfectly. And so what we've done with Flowgear is try to find a good a good blend between the ease of use by giving you kind of a visual design to get integrations built quickly, give you a good way to understand when errors are happening and what actions to take to remediate them. So, and taking that, but at the same time, not overly compromising on the level of sophistication of what you could build. And so Flowgear allows you to use kind of a pre-built connector out the box, but if you need to tinker with it, you can do that far more deeply than a citizen integrator tool is going to let you do. And on the topic of connectors, those are of course really important for any integration platform. And we have several hundred of them available in Flowgear today. We categorize them into two sets. First are what we call the technology connectors. So you've got things out the box that allow you to deal with open standards and services. So for example, different types of databases, file systems, web calls, APIs like REST and SOAP, things like FTP. So all of those are kind of pre-baked in. And then we have a few hundred connectors that deal with specific products, like the ones that you can see on the screen here. So those are going to allow you to connect across ERP, CRM, HR, point of sale, WMS, marketing tools, and many other categories. So fundamentally, Flowgear is a single platform that allows you to integrate between the apps internal to your business, but also allows you to integrate with third parties. So what we mean by that, for example, is that you can connect upstream to vendors, so you could receive orders in an automated fashion from them, whether that's via their API or via files in an FTP server or via emails arriving with attachments in them. Flowgear can pull data from all of those sources. You can also integrate kind of laterally out to your partners and perhaps downstream to your business customers. So an example of that is Flowgear would allow you to create an API that your business customers can consume, and it will do that without a software development project. So it's very quick to get up and running. You can issue an authentication key to each of those individual customers, so each one is only allowed to access their specific data. But then beyond that, if your business customer doesn't have the ability to consume an API, perhaps they don't have the software skill set to be able to do that, you can even integrate directly into their systems. So while products like Sage will offer some kind of supply chain integration, so a Sage to Sage sync is possible across different businesses, they're not going to break out of the Sage ecosystem. But what Flowgear would allow your customer to do is connect, say, from take a Sage Intacct customer invoice and integrate that all the way through into the customer's ERP as an AP invoice. Perhaps it's SAP. So it can go beyond just creating that API and publish that all the way through into their internal ERP. Now, on the topic of connectors, you may have seen there that Netcash is kind of front and center. And so I want to introduce Charles Pittaway from Netcash to talk about how Netcash are using Flowgear in their company. Over to you, Charles.
Morning, Daniel. Morning, everyone. Bright and breezy. Thanks for joining us. The more I've engaged with Daniel over the last year, the more I realize that Flowgear does an incredible amount of things and different things. And I think the Netcash use is probably quite simplified as far as the capability of Flowgear is concerned. But I think it's a great example of how it can be applied. And I thought maybe today I'll just touch base on how we used to approach these types of integrations in the past and how we're looking at doing it going forward. So Daniel, I know the next slide is actually yours, but maybe I could just use that as an illustration. So Netcash is essentially a payments aggregator. We currently do collection and payment services. We integrated in the back end to about 23 service providers in order to exchange and transmit data to and from them. And we've done this in a very old traditional banking sense in the past. And that's currently being looked at to replace all our connectors with our current service providers. But I think the more interesting one for us is that we've always believed that a transaction doesn't originate in a banking system. It doesn't originate at a payment gateway. A transaction always originates in some form of business system. So be that a payroll, accounting, ERP system, that's generally where it originates. It then moves into a request for payment in the case of an invoice or a payroll or supplier payment into a payments ecosystem. And then if you can get it right, you can get that data back into the originating product, core product. So we've always regarded this as what we call the transaction lifecycle. It originates somewhere, it goes into a different ecosystem, and the results of the transaction get fed back into the core system. So how did we do this? We approached Sage in like 2008, and we showed them the vision of what we think systems and payment and accounting and payroll software will engage and interact with each other in the future. And we actually sold the business to Sage, and we became a core part of the Sage product team. So in phase one, you can imagine we're sitting with 8 or 9 different product teams and all the different product stacks, payroll and accounting. And we now having to engage with 9 different product teams because we'd like to do a supplier payment from 5 core accounting systems, and we want to do salary payments from 5 payroll systems. So really heavy lifting as far as development is concerned, because we're going to require the product team to do in-product development. So in other words, how do you send a batch to us, a payments batch from a payroll system to us? That work, that functionality needs to be built into the core payroll product. So a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of development meetings over months and months and months to get this working. The second problem that we had was that we sat with different technology stacks. So we're sitting with a payroll system on COBOL, 1970s, 1980s COBOL system, and we're sitting with a cloud-based solution, and somehow we've got to transfer data from these systems into our system. So we spent a lot of time writing a middleware kind of connected service fabric, which was almost a translator of these different languages into an appropriate language we could use. So that was phase one. A lot of heavy lifting, getting integrated to 9 or 10 products took 5 years to get these products to market, and we still have that running. Obviously, a lot of these systems, payroll accounting systems, have now moved into the cloud. APIs get exposed, and now how do we communicate with these? Because no longer can we talk to the core product team. They're not interested in servicing us as a payments provider. All they do is point us to their API, and they say, no, there's the API, you get the work done, we're not engaging with you. So what do we do now? Now we get into the app environment, and for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, what we needed to do is, if we wanted to talk to the online system, we now had to develop that middleware layer, which was normally in the form of an app. So now we have to get app developers who can do Android and Apple applications, because it essentially becomes the transfer layer, right? It's communicating with the core accounting system, and it's communicating with us. And a lot of the actual work, the user experience, is now actually happening in the app. So they're doing their invoice data capture in their accounting system. They now have to go to their app to pull the data in, add additional information like bank details, etc., and then give the app the instruction to send details to us. So once again, 3 layers, user experience, 3 layers of fabric. What we've done with Flowgear and how this is changing, so if you're looking at the picture in front of you, all development was previously done in Sage product. The phase 2 was the app, which could be this middle piece in the middle that says the work was being done there and the translation was being done by the app. And what we're doing now, and I call it our phase 3 in the future of how we're going to be looking at doing things, is using Flowgear as the connector and the data transfer mechanism between core product and ourselves. The user experience now entirely moves into the Netcash environment. So what happens is our clients would log into their Netcash account and go, my current system that I'm using could be Sage Intacct, could be Sage Business Cloud Payroll or Accounting, and we would have all those connectors sitting within the Netcash environment. You would select it. We would do the OAuth and authentication onto your account. And now every time you wanted to do any form of payment, you would simply come into your Netcash environment. The Flowgear connectors would call the required data from your accounting, payroll, or ERP systems, and you would only engage with the data in the Netcash environment where you want to execute the payments. And once it's been completed and the statement gets downloaded the next day, that data then automatically transfers back into your business system for reconciliation purposes and updating cash books, etc. So I think, just in a nutshell, I don't want to take too much of Daniel's time, but really that is the type of ability that Flowgear gives you, is that you really now can create your own user experience. You're not reliant on core product development teams to assist you, and you control the workflows, the data, the intervals of data being transferred. And we're certainly going to be using it as core technology for how we integrate into business systems going forward. Daniel, anything else? I thought I'd wrap it up quickly for you so that you could get on with the broader Flowgear one.
That's perfect. Thank you. You're giving me a much better context for the demo than I would have set up myself. So thank you.
Awesome.
So as Charles has mentioned, one of the kind of missing pieces was that, sometimes you can do these integrations that don't require any specialized UI. So for example, we could use Flowgear to create a sync that waits for bills or POs or AP invoices to reach a certain state, and then kind of poll for that or get an event on that, and then automatically push those payment batch or create a payment batch inside Netcash and await authorization. And once that are completed, kind of close the loop and go back. But oftentimes it's actually necessary to have some extra UI to do things that are out of band. So UI that doesn't exist either in Sage Intacct or Netcash. And that's exactly as Charles was explaining. For that reason, they have to create a custom app. So one thing that I'm going to show you today is, although on the one hand, you can do this completely automated with no additional UI, the other option is that Flowgear gives you the ability to create a highly specialized, super lightweight user interface that you can tailor, or you can tailor for your customer's business to meet their kind of bespoke requirements. And it can handle whatever rules they have around integrations. Obviously, today we're looking at payments, but the principle extends to pretty much any kind of sync. So we're going to jump into the platform, and before I get to this specific demo, I just want to give you a flavor of what it feels like to start building out a sync. So we're going to jump across into the Flowgear canvas. Let's zoom that screen in a little bit. And this is the list of workflows that we have in this demo account over here. And I'm going to just start by creating a workflow. So here's the design canvas, as we call it. And I'll show you a quick workflow where we're just going to pull information from a SQL database, some customer data, and then we're going to use that to generate a customer record inside Sage Intacct. So I'll begin by clicking the plus button over here to add a step to the canvas. And here I get presented with a list of all of the different connectors that are available. We have connectors over here that talk to third-party apps and services. So SQL and Sage Intacct are good examples of that. Then we have triggers that wait for a condition to be met, queues, time of day, emails arriving in inboxes, files created in the file system or on an FTP server, and so on. Processes that change data in memory. So for example, mapping data from one form to another, or custom scripts. And then finally, flow control that allow you to make conditional decisions. So if this condition is met, then go this way, otherwise go that way. So for our purposes, we will use the SQL query connector. I'll drop that onto the canvas. And as I did that, you can see it populated a list of properties that I need to configure to make this connector operate. First thing I'll do is create or select a connection. And TrainingDB is one that we've set up for this purpose. So the next thing is to create a query that allows me to pull the data that I want out of this database. You can see over on the left-hand side, it is actually showing me the list of tables that are available, but I'm just going to type a basic query. I can preview it in place here, 1 star from contacts. And you can see a tabular presentation of the data that I've just queried coming back. So that's going to be my data source. And then we want to send that into Sage Intacct. So I'm going to add the Sage Intacct connector over here. And again, I need to choose a connection. I believe it is this one. And then one of the things that we do in Flowgear is allow you to select from samples that illustrate how to use each of the interactions. So I can go into choose sample here, and I can search for create customer, this one over here. So out of a list of about 1,300 samples, I'm going to pick create customer. And as I do that, it populates a specimen payload onto the canvas for me. So if I drill that, this is what Sage expects us to send it to generate a customer record. And so now I'm at a point where I've seen an example of what my source data looks like and what my target data looks like. And so in the middle, which is the reason I left this gap, I can map across those. And we do that using our visual data mapper, which is a tool called QuickMap. So I'll go and add that to the canvas. And QuickMap needs to see an example of the source and target, and I'll show it that by creating these flow lines. So the data coming from the output on that query is going to inject into the map, and the result from the map is going to inject into the request for the next stage. Having done that, I can now drill into this map. I think I actually need to just run this. So it has some sample data. So I'm just going to run that once and then drill in. And now we can see an example of the source schema that's been inferred on the left and the target or the Sage schema that's been inferred on the right. And let's see if we can go and create a record. So I'm just going to hard code a unique customer ID because I know it needs to be unique. And let's see, first name, And I think we've got a company field over here. There we go. And you can see on the right-hand side that it's starting to build out a preview. So very quickly, I'm able to see exactly what that data is going to look like. And aside from just mapping fields straight through, I can apply functions to manipulate that data as well. And the key thing is these functions work very similarly to Microsoft Excel. So for example, let's say I wanted to look at the first name and I wanted to uppercase it. There's an upper function just like you'd find in Excel. And instead of referencing a cell in my formula, I'm going to reference a field name. So I start typing upper, it shows me the function names that match. I can tab to complete that. And then instead of typing a cell reference like A1, I can type the field name instead. So first name, for example, and tab to complete. And then I'll go real-time preview as that change is made. So you can see it's uppercase that first name field. So let's try and give this a run now. I'll commit this map. And now what we're able to do is create what we call execution flows along the top. So these are going to show Flowgear how to run these steps, typically from left to right. So the lines along the top, execution, and these property connectors are showing how data needs to map between stages. And hidden that test button at the top of the screen is going to allow me to run it in real time. So the emphasis here is that the platform can very quickly give you the result of what you're doing, and you can, in theory, iterate from there. So it looks like we did have an error from that. It looks like we need a field called print as. Let's see what that is about. I think maybe what I need to do is use this field. Let's go customer there. So here we now need to collapse these two down onto each other. So I can just say, take first name, add a space, and then take last name. That should give us an updated view there. Okay. I'm not exactly sure what I've done wrong here, so I'm going to go back to one that I baked earlier. Let's just go to that. This is what it should have looked like. So similar principle here. So we've just hard-coded a customer ID. I've combined the two names together, and then we've got a company name being injected in as well. Let's just try and run that and see if we can get this to run successfully. Just do one contact. Okay, there we go. So now if I drill into the response, it's confirmed that it's created a customer successfully and it's giving me the IDs back. So you get a sense there of the kind of iteration that you go through, and that's intentional in the platform. The idea is that you'll need to iterate a large number of times to be able to get a solution that's working successfully. And typically what you want to do is start with a basic mapping. So you can see that we've got just a very simple fields mapped in here at the moment. Once you've got that running successfully, you can start to mapping all the other fields that are of interest, and over time you can build toward a production solution. So that's what it feels like to build these workflows. And with that in mind, what I want to do now is show you what we've put in place for Netcash. So what we want to start with is by creating a new bill in Sage Intacct. So this is my Sage Intacct company here. Let's just open this up a little bit, zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to go and add a new bill. Okay, and we're going to post that. Right, so this is the new one that we've just created, and you can see it's $4.99 and it's in a posted status, so it's not in a paid state. And if I wanted to manually deal with the pay step, I'd be able to click this pay link over here. So As I mentioned earlier, often it's necessary to have some kind of additional UI where someone can go in and pick specific things to mark for payment, where that payment is not necessarily pre-integrated into Sage, and that's what we're demonstrating today. So what we have here is a custom app that's been built into Flowgear. And this app is going to do a real-time query into Sage Intacct and get a list of all of the bills that are sitting there. Here, if I filter for this customer, you can see this is the posted but not paid one that we just generated now. And I can see that total is $4.99. So the important thing here is that this custom app is kind of like 100 lines of code, and it's just front-end code. There's no back-end to it. Flowgear itself, through the workflow system that I showed you just now, and we'll look at the backing workflows on this in a second. So Flowgear itself forms that kind of middleware and the back-end layer. So it handles all the integration and presents information to the front end so that you can build a user interface on top of it. So the point is that to create one of these UIs is a fraction of the time that a traditional software development project would require. And there's two options here. One is you can build a user interface that's going to be used across many customers, and that's what we're exploring for Netcash. So it's a user interface that's kind of built once at a fraction of the time that would be required for a traditional kind of full-blown app, and it works between kind of Netcash and Sage Intacct. But the second thing is, because it's so quick to build, you can actually customize these for your customers as well. So if you needed some specific logic around how these payments show up, or which day of the month they're automatically going to be batched for, or really any rule you want, that could be put into a custom user interface very simply. So to use this app, what we're going to do is just select that specific bill, and then we'll create a payment by clicking this button here. And that's generating that payment batch right now in Netcash. So let's go across to Netcash and just see what that looks like. Try that again. Yeah. So if we go into payments now and creditor batches, you can see there's the payment that we just created. So the next step for me would be to go and authorize this. That process is going to take too long for the purposes of the demo. So what I'm going to do is manually treat this as authorized within Sage. And the way that I'll do that is just by doing a check print. Go to print checks. And there's that check. I'm just going to do a print on that. And then we can confirm it. And if we go back into Flowgear now, and we're looking at the Shore Waste Management, it's 1260 is the internal record. You can see currently it's showing that status of posted. And if we refresh that now, it's changed to a status of paid. So we've kind of closed the loop. So on the one hand, we use the app to allow a user to select the specific bills that they wanted to generate a payment for. We batch those into Netcash. The user would then be able to go into Netcash, authorize that, and then a day later, or whatever the cadence was, that confirmation would come through. Flowgear picks that up and then marks that item as paid back in Sage Intacct. And it's important to understand that all of this is highly generalizable. So, we're just showing you one example of payments, but Flowgear can integrate anything to anything and kind of close that loop in any of those scenarios. So let me walk you through what the backing workflows look like for that. There's two going on here. The first one is just presenting a list of the unpaid bills to the app. So this is the backend for the app. This is what you would normally need to code out. And it's literally just using the Sage Intacct connector to query a list of those bills. We should just be able to run it directly from here. And if I drill into what it's sending back, that's a table presentation. So that's the backing data that the app is going to use. And this is why it's so quick to build these apps, because I didn't have to code any of that. And if I decide to change my mind around which columns I want in or any specialized filtering, I'm just making that change inside a Flowgear workflow. So it's something that is I'm very easily able to change. So that's how we surface the data. And then when we're ready to create a payment, let's have a look at the payments workflow. So a few more steps going on here. So at this point, a user has chosen which bills they want to pay. So we're getting a list of those bills. For each one of them, we're getting the content of that bill, and then we're preparing a payment record. So in the simple example, I showed you how we could use QuickMap to translate a customer record from a database into the shape that is required by Sage. Well, this is a QuickMap that's translating bill information out of Sage Intacct into the shape that is required for Netcash. So this is a bit more of a kind of robust mapping that you can see here. You can see a few functions, for example. So here, for instance, there's a date and it needs to be formatted a specific way. And if you're familiar with Excel, you may see some things that you recognize, and we've tried to keep all of the function names very similar to Excel to kind of minimize that learning curve. And over here, we're doing sort of a basic math operation. So the idea is that any transform that you need to express can be done in QuickMap using a kind of formula system that should feel very familiar, and you can get almost an immediate preview of what that data looks like without even leaving the screen. So then we go to the create batch process. We ingest that into Netcash, and then we typically get a response back confirming the creation of that batch within Netcash. So that's kind of an overview of what the design experience looks like within Flowgear. But it's important to understand that although it's good to have tooling that enables you to build something out quickly the first time around, it's also very important that the platform supports you kind of post go live. And so what we're doing here is recognizing that integration itself has a life cycle, just like regular software does. And so what we've looked at so far is kind of that prototype build test stage. But once you get to release and something's in production, how do you maintain that over time and make sure that nothing breaks, so that you can reliably slipstream changes into production without breaking things that are already in play? And how do you have kind of a governance process to ensure that the level of quality of what you're shipping is acceptable? So Flowgear kind of supports you with these ancillary kind of control features, and I'll just show you what some of those look like very quickly. So the first thing is that anytime you save a workflow, we record what we call a revision of that workflow. And a revision is basically a save action. So you've made a bunch of changes and you've reached a meaningful amount of progress. Then you have a revision, and here you can see the timestamps where Nick made different changes to this workflow in preparation for this webinar. And you could go back in time to look at what the design of that workflow looked like at that point in time. So I could go to revision 24 on this workflow and see what the design looked like back then, for example. So you've kind of got this immutable audit trail of how you got to where you are. The next thing that we do is we introduce environments. So notice that at the top, this button says test, but we actually have, in this case, two different environments, test and production. And that's controlling two things. One is it's controlling which version of a workflow is going to run, and also which connections we're using when we run that workflow. So take, for example, the connection to our Sage Intacct company here. I can drill into the connection that we have set up. And notice at the top here, we have these two tabs, one for test, one for production. And we're in the test tab at the moment. And I've got a specific set of details for the test company that I'm talking to. But when I'm ready, I can go into production and put in a completely different set of details. So as I'm moving from test possibly through to QA and then finally to production, I don't need to manually kind of forklift assets across. Flowgear is kind of virtualizing all of that for you. So you just set up all of the connections that you need, and when you're ready, you can target the specific environment that you want to run in. And in some environments, for example, if it's a much more mature customer, or they have a high degree of scale or complexity, or there will be a significant impact to breaking something, you can also use the release management feature that we have. where you can control exactly when a version ends up in the next environment. So what you can see here is I've got version 28 of this workflow, which is the one that's on screen, and that's in test. But when I'm ready, me or ideally someone else on a QA team could review this, go through kind of a bunch of test cases, and once they sign off on that, they can merge those changes or promote them into the next environment. So I've just done that, and you can see, for example, version 28 is now published into the production environment. And that happens seamlessly with no downtime. So the next time this workflow runs, it's now going to be revision 28 that runs in a production context. So Flowgear goes beyond just giving you a visual design paradigm, the ability to iterate quickly, and the connectors, and actually provides the control and kind of support and diagnostic features that you need to keep integration stable over time as things are changing. So just some sort of final comments around the platform. One thing that we're really big on at Flowgear is security. We have a lot of customers in regulated industries like financial services. And so what we've done is created a platform that creates single tenant resources. So everything that we spin up for a customer is actually completely dedicated to them, including a dedicated virtual machine. And that allows us to get an assurance of the highest possible degree of separation between tenants. As a result from that, we also have dedicated capacity. So it's not like some citizen integrated tools where you kind of put into a queue and you might wait a minute or you might wait 5 minutes. It depends how busy they are. We can kind of guarantee the level of capacity and throughput that we're able to achieve. Flowgear, as you've seen in some of the controls that I just showed you, tracks how changes are made. It gives you the control features to make sure that things only ship to prod once they've been reviewed. You've got full audit controls as well. And then we have a lot of flexibility in terms of deployment. We have an in-cloud offering in Microsoft Azure. We're the only iPaaS vendor offering that in the South Africa region, but we can do obviously anywhere in the world. And we have an on-premise option as well for customers in regulated industries, or kind of an own cloud version for customers where that makes sense. And then finally, from a compliance perspective, we also carry a SOC 2 Type 2 certification. So kind of beginning to close out, I also just want to talk a little bit about our commercial model. If you are familiar with the iPaaS space, you may know how some other vendors price. Some of them price based on kind of CPU cores, or the amount of memory that's allocated to your tenant, or the volume of transactions that are flowing through it. We don't do any of that. Instead, what we work on is what we call an active workflow model, which is to say that on any plan, you can create any number of workflows, and your plan only meters the number of those that can run concurrently at any point in time. But what's really important about this is you actually have agency over how many run at a time, because you can trade off kind of chronological time for parallel processing. So if you want to squeeze into a small plan, you can run 50 different processes by chaining them one after the other. And you can use literally one active workflow for as many processes as you need if you're okay with them running sequentially. So, kind of one ends, the next one starts. Or if you have a high volume, or you want to run things in parallel, you can choose to make each of those processes a single active workflow. So we feel that this is a very fair model, because it gives customers the ability to choose exactly what kind of balance between parallel processing and kind of total chronological time they prefer. So summarizing, Flowgear gives you a single platform with a high ease of use, many connectors, a visual design paradigm, the ability to iterate, prototype quickly. And we do this without compromising on the level of sophistication of integrations that you can build, and the control features that ensure that you can deliver to an acceptable level of quality for the use case. And at the same time, we couple that with active workflow pricing. All connectors are included on all plans, and that encourages our customers to be able to experiment with scenarios without having to make a financial commitment upfront. So to close out, I just want to talk a little bit about the partner program that we offer. And if you're a Sage partner, this is something that may particularly be of interest to you. Typically, what we often find is partners around ERPs are constantly faced with this problem, where they're responsible for implementing and supporting and maintaining an ERP. But their customers, always need integrations, but they don't necessarily, as a partner, have a great integration platform offering. So you can kind of buddy up Flowgear with your Sage Intacct delivery to provide a kind of wider spectrum of service to your customers. So specifically, implement Sage Intacct for them, help them with the maintenance and support around that, but then also offer them integration. So perhaps integration from an e-commerce platform into Intacct or a CRM into Intacct. From a commercial perspective, partners enjoy up to a 12% revenue per month into perpetuity. They also have the first full month subscription refunded to them. So you basically, as a partner, have the first full subscription from Flowgear as a commission, and then 12% monthly on top of that. And then you'll also be able to participate, obviously, with project delivery. So you're billing for that project time. Around that, we have a training and certification course. We have a kind of paced sales certification course. And then we also have a technical certification course on Udemy. So we will enable you to build this kind of operational and sales expertise within your business. So hopefully that gives you a good kind of all-rounded view of the platform. If there are any questions, we do have a little bit of time for that. Feel free to type those out in the Q&A. So just have a look in the chat, see if there's anything in there. And next steps, if you're interested, depending on the type of business that you are, feel free to go and sign up for a trial account. What that's going to get you is a couple of things. One is obviously access to the Flowgear platform so that you can take a look at it firsthand. What you'll also be able to get access to is complimentary access to our technical certification course. That's a Udemy course, and you go through that in parallel with your trial account. So as you get to different kind of milestones in the Udemy course, you'll be able to live build integrations in your trial account and then have those solutions verified, and at the end you'll have a certification awarded. And what we also offer, if you're an interested potential customer, we can give you a proof of concept. This is a complementary proof of concept where our team will build out a version of what you're looking for. So you kind of give us two different products. Maybe you need to sync orders from Shopify to Sage Intacct, and we'll build out a proof of concept around that, put those workflows into your trial account for you, demo that to you, and that is then a very fair way for you to evaluate whether this is a good fit for your needs. And finally, if you're interested in our advisor program, then feel free to reach out to us about that. Well, with that, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.